stonemason working on Route 332 near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, made a startling discovery. Over an embankment close to the Juanita River lay the remains of a young woman. The Perry County Sheriff's Department was called to the scene and the investigation commenced. Unfortunately, there's little information surrounding the circumstances in which she was found. The Perry County coroner performed the autopsy and noted that the remains were badly decomposed and primarily skeletal. Due to the state of the remains, the coroner was unable to discern a cause of death. However, it was recorded as a likely homicide. At the time of the discovery, she had been deceased for months, possibly even a year, before she was discovered, with the tentative death date of late 1978 being set. In the report, the coroner noted the remains belonging to a white woman, aged 50 to 38, with light blonde or light brown hair who was 5 feet 2 inches to 5 feet 9 inches. The woman has come to be known as the Perry County Jane Doe, and she'd suffered a fracture to her 9th rib in her life, and by the time of her death, the wound had healed. The Doe Network notes her extensive dental history, reporting no signs of disease or trauma. Dental records indicated her first right molar was removed 3 to 4 years before she was murdered and was hypothesized that her right second molar had also been extracted. Her dental records were circulated to dentists across the state, but nobody recognized them. The most striking piece of evidence lay not with her bones, but with what adorned them. She was found wearing blue wool knit pants with red thread, a white lace blouse, a dark blue tank top, a tan-colored jacket, a white bra, red and gray socks, and white leather buckled shoes. She also wore a silver Avon bracelet, a sterling silver Native American turquoise oblong ring with matching earrings, necklace, and another sterling. Quickly discovered the jewelry may have originated from the Navajo and Zuni peoples in New Mexico and Arizona. This discovery led investigators to these states and wondered whether she may have been a victim of a southwestern serial killer. Composite sketches of the Perry County Jane Doe were placed around town, but sadly no one recognized her. It pained investigators to think that nobody was out looking for her. Months after she was discovered, she was laid to rest in an anonymous grave. Her case has received little coverage and attention over the years, but the Perry County Sheriff's Office and coroner have never forgotten about her. There have been several efforts to uncover the true identity of the Perry County Jane Doe, also known as the girl with the turquoise jewelry. Recently, new dental x-rays were conducted, which showed anomalies that contradicted the initial report. Initially, investigators believed that she'd only had 1 molar removed. However, this new x-ray suggests that at least 2 had been removed, although there's no sign of crowding or disease that would have prompted this. Overall, her dental hygiene was good, signaling she had access to care at some point in her life. In 2008, the girl with the turquoise jewelry was exhumed for further testing. DNA samples were obtained and run through CODIs, and there have been no matches so far. In 2008, Dr. Christine France of the Smithsonian Museum Conservation Institute analyzed 3 samples from Jane Doe: a hair fiber, a bone fragment, and a tooth. Dr. France was able to undertake isotope analysis by examining the hydrogen and oxygen molecules in these samples. Dr. France concluded that Jane Doe likely grew up in the Great Lakes region or southern Canada. Evidence also suggested that shortly before her death, she left the area and spent time in the southwest United States. These results lined up with the indigenous jewelry she had been found wearing. Her details and photographs have also been sent to Canadian authorities, but they too are just as baffled. In 2018, NCMEC released a new composite sketch that they have created using a CT scan of her skull. Redditors in the r/Grateful Doe subreddit have made several suggestions over the years as to her identity. The first is 17-year-old Cheryl Ann Moser, sometime in 1977. According to reports, Cheryl was last seen walking to meet a friend. Another suggestion is Connie Gail Minchika, a 17-year-old girl who disappeared from Napa, California on June 9, 1978. Both Cheryl and Connie were said to have been dating or involved with biker gangs at the time of their disappearances and may believe that the two were met with foul play. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comments section down below. It was on December 18, 1971, when the news of a fire devastated the Sewell family. 16-year-old Michael Sewell had been camping with two friends, Stanley Robinson and Jerry Autry. The three had been in a cabin in Brownstown, Indiana. The cabin had been remote, so by the time help arrived, the cabin had mostly burned completely away. 2 class rings were found at the scene, which were used to determine identity of 2 sets of badly charred remains, Stanley and Jerry. However, Michael was missing. The crime scene yielded little evidence. The surrounding area, including the waters, were all searched in case Michael had managed to escape the blaze. Without Michael's body, there was also suspicion as to why his friends were dead, but he wasn't there. Local gossip that Michael had murdered his friends had gotten so bad that his family had to move from the area. For 5 decades, it remained a mystery. Michael was never seen or heard from again. As time went on, those who remembered Michael began to believe that they would never have answers as to what had happened to him. In 2022, the case was reopened and the caskets of Stanley and Jerry were exhumed with the permission of their families, to do further moderate analysis of the remains. When examined, it was determined that a 3rd set of remains were there. Further DNA testing was done, which determined Michael Sewell's remains had been in the cabin all along, misplaced with his friends' caskets for over 50 years. The closure of the case was bittersweet for the Sewell family, though according to the family, it has provided closure. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comment section down below. It was on November 14, 1971 when best friends, 15-year-old Maria Johnson and 15-year-old Debbie Ackerman set out for a surfing trip headed out for Galveston, Texas. Galveston is known for its beautiful beaches, year-round sunny weather, and some of the best surfing in the United States. The 2 teens weren't nearly inseparable. Debbie was outgoing, bubbly, and remembered as always laughing. Maria was more shy. Lots of people knew her to be quiet, but close friends knew her true and chatty nature. The 2 were just starting out in life and were full of hope and promise, excellent students who both loved the outdoors, especially surfing. Debbie was a champion water skier. Born and raised in Galveston, she was a natural at water sports and took to it easily. Maria had recently moved to the island, and the 2 had met at Ball High School. And the 2 quickly became best friends. The families of Maria and Debbie were also well acquainted with each other. Given their daughter's strong bond, there was no issue with them being out or going out on day trips, but the rule was that they stick together, call home if plans changed, and to be home by curfew. That day, the girls planned to visit Houston, Texas, which is around 55 miles from Galveston or about an hour's drive. As the girls were both 15, they didn't have cars yet and planned to hitchhike. But it was the 1970s and it was incredibly common for young men and women to hitchhike across the globe. Whilst the practice has been outdated as pretty dangerous now, in the 1970s many young people saw it as the perfect way to get around. Hitchhiking in a pair seemed less dangerous than trying to hitch a ride alone. It was around midday on that Sunday. They were near Stewart Beach, outside of a Baskin-Robbins ice cream shop. Witnesses reported seeing the 2 buy ice cream and then start asking around for rides. A man in a white van pulled up to the curb and asked the girls where they were going. The 2 replied that they needed to get to Houston, and coincidentally, Houston was on his route. The 2 giggled as they got into their ride, not knowing it would be the last time they would ever be seen alive. Debbie and Maria's parents began to worry when they didn't receive a call from their daughters. Before the time of cell phones, the parents had no way of knowing if the girls had made it safely to Houston. The next morning, the worried parents called the Houston Police Department to report their daughters missing. Thankfully, the report was taken seriously, and they were not dubbed as runaways as many teens were during this time. The Galveston Police and Houston Police collaborated to coordinate a statewide search for the 2 girls. 2 days later, on November 17, 1971, the search for the 2 girls ended in heartbreak. A fisherman found the body of Maria first in Turner's Bayou in Texas City, roughly 18 miles from Galveston. Law enforcement then found Debbie's body 100 yards away. Both girls had their hands bound, had their clothes from their waist down removed, sexually assaulted, and shot twice to the back of the skull. Their bodies were then dumped in the waters below. The crime rocked Galveston. the state of Texas, and the nation who would be so callous towards such young girls who were only trying to get to Houston. Despite the enormous media outcry, there were few leads and the case quickly went cold. The families of Debbie and Maria made multiple appeals for the guilty party to come forward, but those appeals fell on deaf ears. But the murder of these two young girls was not going to be the end for Texas law enforcement. There were going to be many more murders, all of similar circumstances to plague Texas. This would only be the beginning. And a week after Debbie Maria's bodies were discovered, the body of 14-year-old Colette Anais Wilson was found near the Attucks Reservoir. Colette had been missing since June 17th and had been abducted from Elvin, Texas, after band practice. She had also been shot execution-style to the back of the skull. After the discovery of Colette, another body was found nearby. This would be 19-year-old Glory Ann Gonzalez. She had disappeared from near her apartment on October 28th. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull. Then in January 1972, two boys found the bodies of 13-year-old Sharon Lynn Shaw and Rhonda Renee Johnson in Clear Lake, Galveston. The remains had been scaled till by the time they were discovered. The girls had been missing since August 4, 1971. They'd been abducted while at the beach in Harris County. In addition to these murders, there were 5 others, bringing the total to 11, all in a 12-month period, all with similar circumstances. Over the years, that number would grow to nearly 30 in the area, all unsolved cold cases. Debbie and Maria's case would be reopened in 1998 when convicted killer Edward Harold Bell sent letters to prosecutors in the area, confessing to the murders of Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson in 1971, along with 9 others. The letter started off with, "Dear Sir, I have decided to tell you I was brainwashed into killing Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson in November 1971, and went on to say, quote, if you could get me immunity from prosecution of any kind, could lay a lot of stuff on you and I will." However, when examined, the confessions were deemed as unreliable evidence and dismissed. Bell was interviewed, but he asked for immunity in exchange for testimony and refused to cooperate. Harris County prosecution has gone on to say that letters have now been lost, though detectives who had been able to see the letters stated that there had been information about the crimes that had never been revealed to the public, leaving some to believe they were credible. Edward Bell was already serving a 71-year prison sentence for the murder of Larry Dickens. It was on August 24, 1978, when Bell was in Pasadena, California, parked in a local neighborhood. He was in his vehicle without pants on, watching a group of girls playing. A father and former Marine supervising the kids saw what was going on in the vehicle, and approached Bell, attempting to get the vehicle's keys so that Bell couldn't flee the scene. While confronting him, Bell drew a pistol and shot Larry. Larry was wounded and crawling back to his driveway when Bell got out of his vehicle, grabbed a shotgun from the back, and killed Larry Dickens before getting his keys and attempting to flee. He was caught soon after by law enforcement, but when he was released, he fled the state, eluding law enforcement for 14 years. He fled the country for Mexico and then Central America. It was a tip that came in that he was in Panama after he was shown on the TV program America's Most Wanted. It was there he was arrested and extradited back to California. Edward Bell was born in southern Texas in 1939, primarily living in the Houston area. He'd went to university to become a teacher, but it doesn't appear that he ever was. He was first arrested in 1966 for exposing himself to minors. He escaped jail by asking the judge for leniency and opted for psychiatric treatment, which he received. After treatment, he was arrested again in 1969 for the same crime. Again, jail was avoided in favor of psychiatric treatment. His first wife divorced him and also cut ties with his 3 children, citing him as a danger to herself and their kids. While in treatment, it was discovered that he was romancing patients there, and he ended up marrying a 17-year-old he met while in treatment. He was 31 at that time. After his release, he moved to Galveston with his new wife and became involved in a local surfing business. It was an area that Maria Johnson and Debbie Ackerman had been known to frequent, along with several other of these cold case victims. In 1974, he was arrested again, this time for violently sexually assaulting a patient that he'd met at a mental hospital he'd previously been at. The charges were dropped in that case as well, and he was never formally charged. He was arrested several times throughout his time in Texas, but each time he would always elude being formally charged. He eventually left Texas and moved to California. That was when the Larry Dickens murder occurred. So, an extensive criminal history of inappropriate behavior towards minors, sexual assault, violence, and abduction. He would brag to his friends that he could talk himself out of anything. But for such an extensive criminal history, it's shocking that he was still allowed to walk free for as long as he did. And whilst Edward Bell somewhat claimed responsibilities for the murders, he would later recant his confessions, making this case all the more confusing. Bell told the Daily Mail that his father had brainwashed him as a child to be a flasher and to sexually assault and kill girls. In his original letter, he confessed to murdering Debbie and Maria, along with Sharon Shaw, Rhonda Renee Johnson, Colette Anais Wilson, Gloria and Gonzalez, Georgia Gear, Brooks Bracewell, Nina Lynn Kluge, and Kimberly Ray Pitchford, who had been a 16-year-old murdered in 1973, and hadn't been believed to be connected to the other murders. He also confessed to an unnamed victim that has yet to be identified. He referred to them in his letters as the 11 that went to heaven. Bell then went on to take several interviews with local newspapers in 2017, quote, and did not kill Debbie Ackerman and Maria Johnson. He explained that he had confessed to the murders because he was suicidal at the time and wanted the state to sentence him to the death penalty. He also blamed his depression on a network of government spies that were conspiring against him. Throughout his various prison interviews, Bell mentions the supposed program that he was put through and the brainwashing he endured. In his letters, he confessed to callously taking the lives of Debbie Maria and countless other women, but he also notes that he was brainwashed to do so. One of the journalists who interviewed him believes that he suffers from some sort of severe psychiatric disorder. She described his behavior as erratic, paranoid, and full of grand conspiracies about the government. He never took full responsibility for the murders he committed. Instead, he said that he was forced to buy the program. And despite concerns that he was making everything up, the details about the crimes themselves were clear and matched police reports that were never made public. In addition to the confessions and that he lived in the area of the abductions, he also owned a white van. We know about the van because he was arrested while driving it in January 1972 for exposing himself to minors. This van matched the description of the vans that Debbie and Maria had last been seen getting into. At this point in time, it's unclear because it hasn't been made public if there's DNA evidence to compare. And it's also unclear if Texas law enforcement is continuing to look into Edward Bell as a suspect. It doesn't mean they aren't, it just means it isn't publicly available. There's also no solid evidence that we know of tying him to any of the murders at this point in time. All of the current evidence is circumstantial. Though records show, even when he was in Panama, wherever Edward Bell lived, teenage girls were abducted and murdered. A string of cases seem to follow him in all of the places he has ever been known to reside in. Unfortunately, Edward Bell passed away in 2019 at the age of 80 before investigators could verify his accounts further. Maria's sister told local media that she had no words for Edward Harold Bell, but was happy that he, quote, no longer walks this earth and will never be paroled. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comments section down below. Sophie Sergi was a student at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks, where she was majoring in marine biology. In December 1992, Sophie underwent extensive orthodontic procedures and took the following semester off of school. Sophie was attending the university on a full academic scholarship, but needed to work to pay for the orthodontic work as well as have time to recover from the procedures. Sophie therefore spent early 1993 in her hometown of Pitkas Point, Alaska, living with her mother and younger brother. After her initial recovery, Sophie worked 2 jobs and traveled back to Fairbanks when she needed her braces adjusted. In April of 1993, 20-year-old Sophie made one of those trips to Fairbanks. She took the opportunity to spend time with her friend Shirley Wadley and planned to spend the night in her dorm room on the 2nd floor, Bartlett Hall on the university's campus. Sophie and Shirley spent the evening of April 25th with Shirley's boyfriend hanging out and eating pizza. Shortly after midnight, Sophie left the dorm to go outside and smoke a cigarette. Witnesses would later report that she had smoked with a group of students just outside of the dorm building. At 1:30 a.m., Sophie had not come back to the dorm room. Shirley left her a note on the door saying that she and her boyfriend were going to sleep in a different room. When she came back to her dorm later that morning on April 26th, the note was still on the door and there was no sign that Sophie had slept in the room. Shirley called Sophie's orthodontist office and learned that she had not shown up for her appointment. Sophie's body was discovered by a janitor around 2 o'clock that afternoon. She was lying face down in a bathtub in the second-floor bathroom of Bartlett Hall. She had not been found earlier in the day by the students using the sinks and showers because the bathtub was in a private room, off of the main bathroom. Sophie had been stabbed, shot, and sexually assaulted. The medical examiner estimated that she had died in the very early hours of the 26th. Authorities interviewed everyone who lived in Bartlett Hall, but found very few leads. There was DNA found on Sophie's body, but no match to it was ever found in any police database over the years. A cold case unit from the Alaska State Police re-interviewed every resident from Bartlett Hall they could find in 2010, but still no arrest was made in the case. Following the arrest of Joseph James DeAngelo, the alleged Golden State Killer who was identified through genetic genealogy, the Alaska State Police decided to try the same approach in Sophie's case. They uploaded the DNA from her crime scene into GEDmatch, an open-source DNA database, originally developed to help individuals research their family trees. On December 18, 2018, a forensic genealogist identified a woman who was a close relative of the contributor of the DNA. That woman was eventually found to be the aunt of 44-year-old Stephen Downs. Downs was already known to investigators. In 1993, he had been an 18-year-old student at the University of Alaska at Fairbanks and had lived in Bartlett Hall. His roommate, Nicholas Dazer, worked as a security guard and had helped secure Sophie's crime scene in 1993. When Dazer was re-interviewed by the Alaska State Police in 2010, he told them that Downs had kept an H&R-22 revolver in their dorm room. That weapon would shoot bullets consistent with the one found in Sophie, but the markings on the bullet were too general to match it to a specific weapon. According to a state when he was identified as a suspect in Sophie's murder, Downs was living in his hometown of Auburn, Maine. Since 2011, he had been working as a nurse, but he had a history of poor performance and inappropriate behavior. He lost a nursing job in 2016 for a totality of substandard performance, according to his record with the Maine State Board of Nursing. He was also accused of inappropriate behavior with 2 female co-workers at that job, and had to complete a course on professional boundaries in nursing. Co-workers from his most recent job have come forward with allegations ranging from tampering with medications to mistreating patients. Several of his co-workers and patients reported being scared to be alone with him. The Maine State Police worked with the Alaska State Police to further investigate Downs. On February 13, 2019, they went to his home to interview him. He denied any involvement in the case, but said he remembered Sophie's face on posters that were put up after her murder and feeling sorry for her. The following day, the Maine State Police returned with warrants to collect a DNA sample from Downs in Search's house. The DNA was tested and confirmed to be a match to the DNA found at Sophie's crime scene. On February 15th, Stephen Downs was arrested and charged with murder and sexual assault. He is currently fighting extradition to Alaska to face these charges. Between 1991 and 2006, a serial rapist, eventually dubbed the NorCal Rapist, assaulted at least 10 women in 6 counties in Northern California. He would force his way into victims' homes, restrain them, and rape them multiple times. He abducted some of his victims, taking them from their homes to force them to withdraw money from an ATM, which led to the infamous images of him on security footage, wearing a clear mask meant for burn victims. He apparently also stalked his victims. 2 weeks after he assaulted a woman on Halloween of 1996 wearing a skeleton mask, he called the dental office where she worked. He claimed to be sorry. One of his other victims was Maki Anderson. In July 1997, she was a 21-year-old student at Chico State University. During her attack, she managed to break free of the restraints the NorCal Rapist had used on her. He rebound her, but she broke free 2 more times. She then stabbed him in the arm with a pair of scissors. As was his habit, her attacker took Mackey's bedsheets with him in an attempt to limit the amount of evidence police had to investigate with. He left behind her pillowcase, though, and it had a sample of the blood he had lost in Mackey's brave attempt to fight him off. This was just one of the sources of DNA the NorCal rapist left behind at his crime scenes. Police were never able to find a match to it in any database, however. In 2018, the sample was entered into GEDmatch. Within 10 days of entering the sample, authorities were able to identify a suspect through one of his relatives, surveil him, collect a straw from his garbage can, test it, confirm that the suspect's DNA matched the samples from the crime scenes, and make an arrest. The man identified and arrested was named Roy Charles Waller. Waller was arrested as he arrived to work on September 20th, 2018. The 58-year-old worked as a safety specialist in the Environment, Health, and Safety Department at the University of California at Berkeley. On September 21st, the university released a statement saying that Waller was placed on investigative leave, and that they will be reviewing all open on-campus sexual assault cases to confirm that Waller had not been involved in them. When Waller had his first court date on September 24, 2018, Mackie Anderson was sitting in the second row of the courtroom. Waller was charged with 12 counts of forcible sexual assault, all stemming from an hours-long attack on 2 roommates in October 2006. After the hearing, Mackie spoke with the media outside of the courthouse. "I want him to know that he did not break me," she told them. "He did not break me, and I know what he has coming to him. He needs to be locked up until he learns what it is to be human. The original dozen charges, while our faces, could put him in prison for the rest of his life." However, the original 12 charges were only in connection to the one attack in Sacramento County. On January 7, 2019, he was also charged with 28 additional offenses, in connection with the crimes in 5 other California counties. He is next due to appear in court on March 8, 2019. On June 13, 1993, a woman called the property manager for her apartment in a building in the 3100 block of Pillsbury Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to complain that water was leaking into her apartment. The manager determined that the water was coming from a different unit in the building and let himself into it to investigate when there was no answer at the door. He found the water was coming from the shower, which had been left running. He also found a large amount of blood in the nude body of 35-year-old Jean Childs. She had been stabbed multiple times. Jean was a sex worker who brought her clients back to the apartment she was found in, which was rented by her boyfriend. He had been out of state at the time of her murder. Police collected several items from the scene that would eventually be tested for DNA, including a blue towel, a washcloth, a red t-shirt, a comforter, and a bloodstain in the sink. The unidentified DNA found at the scene was never matched to any sample in police DNA databases. In 2018, authorities uploaded the unknown DNA to a commercial DNA database and worked with a forensic genealogist to identify the contributor of the DNA. Police have not disclosed which database they used, but it does not appear to be GEDmatch, as the Hennepin County attorney described it as a genealogy company you see advertised on TV. The genealogist identified 2 individuals with the right amount of shared DNA to the relative found in the commercial database. In investigating the 2 individuals, police found that one of them had moved to the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area in early 1991 and moved away 6 months after Jean's murder. His police record was mostly composed of traffic violations and driving while intoxicated convictions for soliciting sex using the internet in 2015. In January 2019, police placed the suspect under surveillance and followed him to a hockey game. Police observed him buying a hot dog and wiping his mouth with a napkin before throwing it into a trash can along with the cardboard container the hot dog had been served in. They then collected the napkin and submitted it to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Laboratory to look for DNA on it. There were multiple DNA signatures on it, but one of them matched the unknown sample from Jean's crime scene. Based on this match, police arrested the suspect, 52-year-old Jerry Westrom, in February 2019. Westrom owned and operated several businesses, including an organic corn farm in Minnesota, and was an active supporter of 4-H and youth sports programs. He is married and the father of 3 children. A direct DNA sample was taken from him after his arrest, and it was confirmed to be a match to samples taken from the washcloth, the comforter, and the blue towel from the crime scene. Westrom spoke to police after his arrest and denied any involvement in Jean's death. He further claimed that he had never been in that apartment or in that apartment complex. He said he did not recognize Jean from her picture and denied having sex with any woman in Minneapolis in 1993. He could not explain why his DNA was found at the scene. Westrom was released on bail following his arrest. His family, as well as several friends, supported him in court for his first hearing. His attorney, Stephen Meshbesher, has told the media that his client intends to plead not guilty. He also claims that the evidence in the case is thin and that his client's arrest was premature. Westrom is due back in court on March 13, 2019. 30-year-old Jack Upton was a popular and responsible manager at a Safeway grocery store in Fremont, California. His co-workers were therefore worried when he missed several shifts at work. On December 17, 1990, police were called to check in on him at his apartment. There, police found Jack's body, beaten and stabbed to death. His 1985 Nissan 300ZX was missing from the apartment complex's lot. A week later, the car was found in a mall parking lot in Thousand Oaks, California, more than 350 miles away. Police were able to lift fingerprints from inside of it. At the crime scene and in the car, police found matching blood samples that they could not identify, but believed came from Jack's killer. Authorities would periodically run the DNA from the unidentified sample through databases as they continued to improve over the ensuing years, but they were never able to find it. In 2018. The Fremont Police Department contacted Parbon Nanolabs, who used forensic genealogy to identify Russell Anthony Guerrero as a potential suspect. In October 2018, Fremont police traveled to Tempe, Arizona, where Guerrero was living, to begin surveilling him. They were able to collect a discarded DNA sample from him, which proved to be a match to the DNA found in Jack's apartment and car. Sometime after the DNA match was made, Guerrero's fingerprints were determined to be a match to ones found in the car. On January 17, 2019, Guerrero was charged with 1 count of murder by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. On January 22, Fremont detectives arrested him in Chandler, Arizona. Authorities have not yet found a connection between Jack Upton and Guerrero, nor have they identified a motive for the crime. Guerrero does have a criminal record in several states. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comment section down below. Before we proceed, I've got an exciting surprise for you. We've launched a brand new channel dedicated to intriguing content such as old historical mysteries, cold cases, and particularly chilling horror stories perfect for bedtime. Drop a comment letting us know if you're a fan of horror stories or not. You can find the link in the description below. Let's find out who will be the first to explore it. Alright, let's dive back into the video. Ezra Oyren and her husband, Oscar, were both of Turkish descent, but they and their families were based in London. Ezra and Oscar moved to Ireland for work around 2007, where they lived in Clondalkin, West Dublin. They had a son, Emin, there 2 years later, and Ezra took time away from work to take care of him. February 23, 2011 was less than a week before Ezra's 38th birthday. She was busy making preparations for her mother and mother-in-law to come for a visit from London the following day. At approximately 7:15 a.m., she told her husband that she would be running to a local shop to buy milk, but that she would be back in time for him to take the car to get to work. Ezra did not return. After a few hours, Oscar reported her missing. Ezra and Oscar's car was found at 11 o'clock that night, parked in a lot near the sea in Bray County, Wicklow. Her purse was locked in the trunk of the car and there was no sign of Ezra. Ezra's phone has never been recovered, but the last signal from it came on the far side of Bray Head from where the car was found. There were several pieces of surveillance footage of Ezra's car, a gray Renault Twingo, found from the day she went missing. The car was first seen at a roundabout, for minutes away from Ezra's house, but not until 40 minutes after she had left her home. The car was then picked up by cameras in Bray, driving erratically, once almost colliding with a Skoda Octavia. The parking lot where Ezra's car was found did have cameras, but none that showed the spot where the car was found. Despite the fact that her car was found in Bray, there is no evidence that Ezra ever actually made it there. In all of the surveillance footage of the car, the quality of the footage is not good enough to show who was driving it. There were public appeals for the driver of the Skoda Octavia that almost collided with Ezra's car to come forward in hopes that they could confirm or deny if Ezra had been driving her car at the time. But they were unsuccessful and the driver has never been identified. It is possible that something happened to Ezra in the 40 minutes between when she was last seen and when her car went through the roundabout. Her assailant then could have driven the car to Bray to ditch it, to throw off the investigation into her disappearance. While there is no footage showing who got out of Ezra's car in Bray, there is footage showing one angle of the lot where it was found. Authorities believe that there is one woman in the footage who could be Ezra. They say that the woman is walking without purpose, and that she is never seen in any of the footage walking back to the parking lot. Ezra's family has seen the footage, and they do not believe that it is her. Upon closer inspection of the footage, a small dog is visible. Ezra's family believes that the woman is walking the dog, and she seems like she isn't moving with purpose because she is waiting for the dog as it runs around. She does not necessarily have to return to the parking lot because she may live close by and walked home. A few months after Ezra went missing, her husband made the decision to move back to London with their son to be closer to family. While Oscar wanted to remain in Ireland to help keep pressure on investigators to work the case, he was afraid of what might happen if he had some sort of health crisis or accident, since he was the only relative his son, Emin, had in Ireland. The main contact with the media for Ezra's family has been Ezra's sister, Berna Faddeen. Berna makes as many television and radio appearances as she can, and uses her vacation days from her job in the UK to travel to Ireland to post flyers and follow leads in her sister's case. On the first anniversary of Ezra's disappearance in 2012, her niece Ada joined Berna on her trip to Ireland to post flyers. In Neilstown, where Ezra had been a regular customer. As Ada left the shop, a worker ran out after her with a set of keys. On the keyring, there were pictures of Ezra, her son, and her husband. The car key was confirmed to be for Ezra's car. The keys had been left on the counter before Christmas of 2011, and the shop owner had kept them in case someone came back looking for them. There was no security footage of who left the keys on the counter. Ezra had lost a set of keys 6 months prior to her disappearance, around November 2010, but her sister does not believe that the keys found in the shop were the set. The security footage of Ezra's car driving in Bray was sent to the UK in 2018 in hopes that it could be enhanced enough to identify who was driving the car. The effort was unsuccessful. Ezra remains missing 8 years after her disappearance. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comments section down below. Connor and Sheila Dwyer lived in Fermoy, County Cork, where they had raised 2 sons. 62-year-old Connor had worked a variety of jobs throughout his life, including working as a plumber and a driver. In 1991, he was working part-time as a chauffeur for German businessman Fritz Wolf when he was in Ireland. 60-year-old Sheila was described by neighbors as lovely but somewhat reserved. The couple was last seen on April 30th, 1991, walking into St. Patrick's Church to attend a funeral. The following day, Sheila spoke on the phone with one of her sisters. Sheila was very close with both of her sisters, Nellie and Maisie, and spoke with them frequently. Maisie was therefore concerned about Sheila when she did not hear from her after May 1st. On May 18th, she went to the Dwyer's Chapel Hill home and knocked on the door, but got no response. She returned the next day with the Gardaí, who forced entry into the home, out of concern that something had happened to the couple. Connor and Sheila were not inside their home. Gardaí did find the couple's passports, reading glasses, and £1,000 in cash hidden in a biscuit tin. The only items missing from the home were a few pieces of clothing, presumably because Sheila and Connor had been wearing them, and the couple's white Toyota Cressida. Extensive searches have never found any sign of the Dwyers or their car. Their bank accounts have not been accessed since their disappearance. There were reported sightings of the couple in France and Germany over the years, but none of them have ever been confirmed, despite cooperation from Interpol to investigate them. The Dwyers did not have their passports, and ferry records do not show their car being transported abroad. A year prior to the couple's disappearance, another person from Fermoy went missing. 54-year-old Billy Fennessy was last seen on March 30th, 1990. There was no sign of Billy for the next 22 years until October 2012. A car with human remains inside was found at the bottom of the River Blackstone during a routine dive by the Blackwater Subaqua Search and Rescue Team. The car was the same Megan model as Billy's, and in May 2013 DNA results confirmed that it was indeed Billy found inside of it. The discovery of the car renewed concerns have accidentally driven into the river at a still unknown location. While various waterways were searched during the course of the investigation, Billy Fennessy's car went undetected during these searches, so it stands to reason that the Dwyer's car could still be hidden underwater. For now, the cause of the couple's disappearance remains a mystery. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comment section down below. 41-year-old John Johnson is a father of 4 children who works as a taxi driver in his native Iceland. On February 8, 2019, he traveled to Dublin to participate in a poker tournament. His fiancée was supposed to come with him, but she was delayed when she had issues with her passport. John played a game of poker that night, and his fiancée arrived in Dublin the following morning, February 9th. She went to the hotel they were booked at, the Hotel Bonington, and was woke Jon up. While his fiancée was having coffee at the bar in the hotel, Jon walked outside. It is not known why he left the hotel. He never returned. His passport, phone, and wallet were all left behind in his hotel room, and there has been no activity on his bank account. When June was not found within 2 days, 12 friends and family members flew to Dublin from Iceland to help search for him. The area around the Hotel Bonington was methodically searched and covered in missing persons posters. According to his family, it would be out of character for June to have simply just walked away from his life and left them wondering where he was. He was very responsible and considerate and would call home if he ever worked late, but not a large enough amount of money that his family believed it would have caused undue stress for him. Surveillance footage helped trace Jon's route after he left his hotel. He left the hotel at 11:05 a.m. and was picked up on a camera at McGettigan's bar 2 minutes later. He is seen going on to Swords Road heading north. The last sighting of Jon was outside of Highfield Hospital, where he was seen heading north towards Collins Avenue. On February 23rd, intensive, large-scale search was conducted with the help of 80 volunteers. During a radio interview, one of Jon's brothers thanked the people of Dublin for their assistance in their search efforts, and also vowed that his family would not leave Dublin without Jon. Jon, so far, remains missing. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comment section down below. 36-year-old Sean Duffy lived in rural Meanacross, Dunglow. He had a burly build and stood at 6 foot 4 inches tall and was described by one of his neighbors as a tank of a man. He used his imposing figure in some of his odd jobs as a bouncer. He made his living doing a variety of other things as well, including working as a driver and an undertaker. While he was known for being physically imposing, he was also notable for his sense of style, usually going out in a tweed jacket and tie. He was close to his large family, including his 2 brothers and 5 sisters. Sean spent the evening of January 28, 2005, out at the Strand Bar with his brother Kevin of January 29th. Later that day, Kevin went to see Sean and was surprised to find the front door of Sean's small bungalow unlocked. When he went inside, he found Sean's body lying face down on the couch. He had been stabbed, beaten, and had an arrow from a crossbow sticking out of his right arm. In the course of the investigation into Sean's death, over 1,400 lines of inquiry were pursued, and authorities interviewed over 700 witnesses. Sean's multiple jobs and varied hobbies, while they made him an interesting character, gave authorities lots of leads to follow up on. While Sean cared about his community and took time to help his elderly neighbors, his diverse interests also included things that could be construed as dangerous enough to become motives for his murder. His own mother has said that Sean had a lot of enemies, and there were concerns over his dealings with horse races and the buying and reselling of cars. At the time of his death, Sean also had an assault charge pending against him. It has been theorized that multiple assailants must have been involved in Sean's murder. Given his size and strength, he would be difficult for one person to physically overpower. The use of multiple weapons also supports this theory. Following the 14th anniversary of Sean's murder in 2019, Vigardi appealed to the public for information with Detective Inspector Pat O'Donnell, reminding the community that it is never too late to come forward with information in the case. O'Donnell also announced that evidence from the case is being re-examined in hopes that the advances in technology since Sean's death will result in a DNA profile that will help move the case forward. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comment section down below. Rhonda Runningbird was born on November 22nd in Camrose, Alberta. Shortly thereafter, she and her mother moved back to the Siksika Nation to be with family. Shortly after she graduated high school, Rhonda met her first husband and had 2 children. A few years later, at a family party, she met Fred Legros, her aunt's husband. Not long after meeting, Rhonda and Fred left their spouses and moved in together in Red. Rhonda gave birth to their son in January 1994. On March 26, 1995, Fred, Rhonda, their 14-month-old son and Fred's aunt went out on a hunting trip to Swan Lake, Alberta. Rhonda never came back from the trip. According to Lagrell, his truck had gotten stuck in the mud, and he had stormed off into the woods with a shotgun in frustration. When he came back after dark, Rhonda had left the truck to go for help. When Lagrell and his aunt finally found help 2 days later, Rhonda was reported missing. Although Fred did not wait to show authorities where the truck had gotten stuck and therefore where to start their search for Rhonda. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police did search for Rhonda, but after a few days, the medical examiner told them that Rhonda could not have survived for that long out in the woods on her own, and the search was called off. When Rhonda's family arrived to search for her, they had the first of many disrespectful and frustrating interactions with the RCMP. The first officer, Rhonda's mother, Mavis Crowchild, told her that the reason they had not found her daughter was because she was off on the streets of Edmonton, getting drunk. Rhonda's family, in the course of their own search of the area, located a pair of glasses, an unused colostomy bag, and a pair of shoes, tied in a distinctive fashion, that they believed belonged to Rhonda. The RCMP told them that none of the items belonged to Rhonda. This was in part because the prescription of the lenses and the glasses did not match Rhonda's. However, the RCMP obtained Rhonda's prescription from an optometrist she was no longer seeing, and they refused to compare the glasses to records from her current optometrist. The idea that Rhonda walked off into the woods in the dark and got lost has also been highly contested by her family. According to family members who saw Rhonda just before the hunting trip, she was barely able to walk at the time. Lagrell was physically abusive towards Rhonda, with one of the beatings he inflicted on her being so severe that she had to use a colostomy bag as a result of the internal damage it caused. Rhonda was scheduled for surgery the day after she went missing to repair this damage and hopefully lessen her pain and improve her poor health. She had been gathering evidence to have Lagrell charged with assault, something he had learned just prior to her disappearance. Even if Rhonda had mustered the strength to go search for help, her family does not believe she would have gotten so lost in the woods that her body was never found. According to Mavis Crowchild, Rhonda had been trained since she was a child in how to make her way if she were lost. If Rhonda had been physically able to get out and walk for help, she surely would have been able to navigate back to the major road that was less than a mile from where the truck got stuck. The RCMP says that there is a person of interest in Rhonda's disappearance, but that person has since passed away, and that there is not enough evidence to determine if foul play was involved in Rhonda going missing. Fred Lagrell died in 2016. Rhonda's 2 oldest children were placed in Mavis Crowchild's custody 2 months after she went missing, and her son with Lagrell was eventually left with Lagrell's aunt. Neither Rhonda nor her remains have ever been located. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comment section down below.